Hello.
Hello. Good
Is this going to
morning.
be another week with no technical issues?
I sure hope so. we're gonna try. We're gonna go at it and see if we can get through this without any major technical issues. I said major.
Yes.
Well, good morning. Welcome to the latest episode of the Project Failure Files, the series for anyone who manages projects or project teams or anything like that for a living. I'm Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, founder of Collab Talk, and welcome to another episode of our series where Sharon and I, we explore different management topics, a lot of project management stuff, leadership development, but from the perspective of what not to do as you manage projects. And in each episode, we talk about some of the, definitions, but common pitfalls. We share our personal stories and experiences, and we explore strategies and best practices to help you to be successful.
So in this episode, we are talking about the joys of building bureaucratic structures within bureaucratic structures inside of your organization with or without a reason, because you need more bureaucracy. It's more fun.
Or not build those bureaucratic structures.
Maybe not what not to do. Maybe.
Yeah.
So sometimes structure is needed. And we talk a lot about this, right? We talk about the need for rigor, and we talk a lot about the need for processes and the need to keep things organized and optimized. But our discussion today is about how could you create structure?
Could you create structure? Yes, you could.
But should you? Just because you can doesn't always mean you should, because you might have the best intentions, but if you don't do it without thoughtful consideration, cultural perspective, and honestly, some sort of a plan and metrics and accountability around it, you'll likely fail.
What? You mean you shouldn't do things that you're not prepared to do? What?
I love these people who start programs and then they're like, they come back to me and they're like, the program's not working. I'm like, well, what are you doing to manage it and mitigate it? And they're like, well, nothing. And I'm like, well, that's why.
Well, so, and not to confuse that with, we'll get into this on the discussion, but with like new product introduction. And there are some people that specialize in the launching of new products. But having said that, there tends to be a structure, a process, a methodology behind that. So they own that front end, but then there's the structure behind it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Should be good. It'll be interesting. I don't know where it's going to go. But as always, with every episode, feel free to comment throughout the episode, share your experiences and any great examples or feedback that we may have missed.
All right, let's get started with the definitions.
Yeah, what is bureaucracy? It's like and I think the word bureaucracy, I think my definition is that it's structure without definition. So the people that would go in is like, well, it's the way that we've always done it, and we'll just band-aid and add other layers and do all these other things for the sake of having structure there. Versus then there's people that have the opposite. They're just like, well, we're being agile. It's like, well, being agile doesn't mean a lack of structure.
Yeah. I think there's the idea of governance, which is really and process management, which is to define what you need to do, put some rules in place, put some structure in place and be able to follow it. And then there's bureaucracy, which is, like you said, it's the idea of, well, we're doing things because we do things. And somebody told me to do the thing, and I just do the thing because I know I'm supposed to do the thing. And I've never been accountable for whether I actually need to do the thing or not.
It's a great way to push accountability away from yourself. I mean, you like structure is there for consistency. So you have accountability, you've got direction. So it's a way, especially repeated processes, projects, new employees coming in, you've got that structure. But when your processes, the approvals, the policies, if they exist without adding value, again, it goes back to we've always done it this way. They've always been this way. They can actually slow down execution, get people really frustrated, drive a lot of that shadow IT where people go off and say, well, this is nonsense. I know how to do it my way. And they go and do it that way. And it can stifle innovation. I've been, how many times have you been told in your career, Sharon, like, this is not your job. It's not in your job description and you shouldn't be doing this. I mean, I found myself arguing that. It's like, look, It needs to be done. No one's doing it. I'm going to do it. It's like, if you want to take it, you find the person who owns this that should be doing it, and they want to take it over. Great. In the meantime, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, no, in fact, so if you ever want a fun movie to watch around this whole topic, there's a movie called The City of Embers. Really good. But basically throughout the whole movie, like, they're talking about whose responsibilities are which anyways. It's kind of funny. So if you haven't seen it, this is like completely aligns with this. It's really cute. But, I think about this in terms of, I love to look at like old ridiculous laws. You can't take a bath on Sunday, and you can't marry your sister, crazy laws. And we think, there are some laws that we're like, well, of course, like, yeah, we need to keep that law because it makes sense. And then, like, you can't have your 4-year-old cleaning chimneys. Perfectly legitimate law, right? I think that makes sense. We want to keep child labor in there. But we think about laws that are outdated. Maybe they don't stand reason anymore. Maybe they don't serve a purpose anymore, but they're just there. That can cause confusion and frustration. And in fact, it can create risk and problems. And bureaucracy is that idea of leftover processes, leftover organization that at the end of the day, you don't really need anymore, but nobody ever went back and cleaned up. And so it happens because most of the time we put things in place for a good reason and a good purpose, but then pulling it back is a lot harder.
I just had kind of a not a great example for this, but it just popped into my mind. Like, you're probably not aware of it. Like the Missouri back in the mid 1800s had a Mormon extermination order, so it was legal to go and kill Mormons, and it wasn't taken off the books until the 1970s.
Yeah, no, if you really want some rabbit hole, having a good time, like, go look at old laws that have not been repealed. So it's super fun.
Crazy stuff like women should not walk on the left side on Thursdays. Kind of weird rules. I mean, there's bizarre stuff that's out there. Like, how is this stuff still out there?
It will definitely remind you and teach you to go into your organization and question, like, why do we still do it this way? And I think that's a big thing, right? So we're going to talk about like figuring this out, but I think what not to do, right? What not to do, how to do things wrong. And some of the things that I've experienced is going in, especially to large organizations where people have been there a really long time, and they're like, I don't want to make waves. I don't want to tell anybody. I'm like, why do you still do it like this? Like, this is a complete, absolute, utter waste of time. No. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to say anything. And I think what not to do and ways to fail is to really create a culture of people not ever saying that things need to change and not really holding people accountable for, why am I even still doing this?
Yeah. Don't be afraid to ask questions, to point out, hey, this is an outdated process. This is keeping us from really understanding the risks here. People do that. They build layers of bureaucracy because they don't trust their employees. They don't trust their upper management. They're building a fiefdom. They want control over something. And so if there's, some of the signs, some of the indications that there is unnecessary bureaucracy. Sometimes we don't need to be told, like, we're well aware of the thing, but there's too many approval layers for a simple decision. And you see this a lot too. And there's nothing wrong with, task-based organizations where, like ticket organizations support, like, you do not move forward. You don't work on anything that's not associated with the ticket, with the customer, things around that. There's nothing against that structure. But if you're more in the information worker space, knowledge management space, these are areas where it really is wide open. So if you're having to go and get approval on any move, that's something that, like, when I've interviewed for jobs, when I've looked at opportunities, I ask about that. What's the level of autonomy here? What am I actually doing? What am I asked to do? The last few companies that I've worked for, a big part of my job has been to help change the culture, to help identify opportunities to go and clean up. As a consultant, that's a big part of what we do, is, the frustrating thing too is that for us to see, we walk into a lot of organizations and who know that they need help, and then the people that bring us in are sometimes the front line of pushing back on any of that change. You paid me all this money, and then you don't want to hear anything that I have to say.
Oh yes, yeah. We get paid a lot of money for people to not listen to us. I think it happens a lot. But on the flip side of this, and I don't want to point out that, a lot of people are like, oh, well, if there's too many approvals, it's obviously bad. I'm going to push back on that a little bit. I mean, I did some work many thousands of years ago for the Fed and the Treasury Department, and I had to have multiple board approvals to be able to do the things I did. And that's a good thing, right? We don't want people just in there randomly messing around on projects. There are cases where governance, rules, proper approval procedures really do need to be followed because the information is sensitive, the project is sensitive, there's very real limitations around it at a business rule level. Unfortunately, there's just as many places that have those same levels of approvals for things that don't have the same level of sensitivity.
Right. I will share like one of my favorite Buckley-isms that I use a lot. The more people are involved in the process, the more likely people will support that process. You talk about governance with a lot of this and having bureaucracy, like you're right. Like I went in, as a consultant, I was brought in to do audits of accounting systems and processes for a very large organization. And they had a lot of violations. And so I tried to be very transparent. Like, here is why we're doing these additional steps. Like, you must follow these protocols. You will lose your job if you do not follow these protocols. You need to do these things. And so, but here is why. And when people understand, like, okay, this is so that it is a clear, a line of demarcation between our systems, our client systems, this data, these are the steps, this is the process, why we're doing it this way, because of these systems. We might be optimized, we might be automated, but the systems we're working with, in this case, financial systems, these banking systems, which this was 20 years ago, were not optimized. They're usually at the forefront of technology now, but yeah, so there could be very good reasons why. And I think we're all adults. If we're aware of those, if explained to us, then we are more likely to do that thing.
Yeah, no, and a lot of it comes down to communication. But truthfully, yeah, this goes back to if it makes sense to you and it's communicated well, you're probably okay with it. If you're not okay with it and you're kind of questioning it, maybe it's a good time to have a chat.
Right. Well, again, to go back to, what are some of the signs that bureaucracy is hindering your progress? So one, is that too many approval layers for simple decisions? Second, too much documentation, excessive documentation requirements that really don't contribute, or they're duplicating that effort. We've all seen this one where you go into the DMV or the hospital, they're like, ask you for all this information again, be like, I just gave this to you the last time. It's like, oh, I know, but we just need this again and fill this out, this other form. It's like, you had me answer these same questions in an online form, and now you're handing me papers to fill out on a clipboard on my first visit. Anyway, that kind of thing. Might need to do some cleanup there. But then there's policies that are in place that serve no purpose other than preserving the way that we did it, that tradition there. And then there are other processes that create bottlenecks. So things that go to a named person rather than to a role. So that constantly.
I think my soul just shivered a little bit.
That is the most common thing that we see in the Microsoft ecosystem with workflows is people go and hard code in, like, this is the way it's done. And so rooting those things out and opening that up so that anybody with these permissions, with this function, can go in and do that with oversight. But
we want Linda to be able to take a vacation. She needs to be able to leave her desk once in a while. Don't you feel for Linda?
Yeah, poor Linda. But that's why, having governance and oversight of all of those things, that's why, as part of any governance body that you have, and I've run these on organizations, I know, Sharon, you have as well, that having that oversight, going back and looking at, okay, we fixed this is working great. Then you look at where's the next greatest bottleneck or new things that have opened. That is an ongoing operational thing. So if you also have the added benefit of culturally, you give everyone that task to find in their role, in their projects, in the clients, the stakeholders they're working with, to look for areas where we can reduce the red tape, reduce the bureaucracy. You should be having those conversations on a regular basis. I love incentivizing people to find those opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And even to say like, this is a while back, but a company where they would pay out, it was like 5 to 10% of the cost savings as a bonus to the person who found it and defined a fix for it.
Yeah, I think that's
great. Cool.
That's fantastic. I mean, at the end of the day, it's, it's a win-win for everybody.
Yep. Everybody's looking for that. What's that $1 million savings? What? I want that bonus. Yeah. Hey, 50 to 100K bonus would be a great thing, but usually, sorry, to that sounds exciting, but then it had to be divided by the team.
I was going to say, don't forget that it's
there's a bunch of people that fix it. Right. But, or it goes into a pool for the overall team or whatever, but hey, it's still all good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's necessary to have some level of governance and oversight over all those things, and it should be about facilitating progress against that rather than slowing it down even further.
Well, it needs to serve a purpose, right? At the end of the day, anything we do, when we go to efficiency management, we really have a conversation about efficiency management. What are you doing? Why are you doing? And what is its ultimate goal and purpose? If it doesn't have an ultimate goal and purpose, then why are you doing it? And every single thing that you do every single day should be challenged through that lens, so that you know that you're not wasting time and your team's not wasting time. And your business at an enterprise level isn't wasting time.
Yeah. One of the clearest examples in my personal experience is something that's very simple, and I think a lot of people can relate to, is that you have like a manager of managers that have too many direct reports, too many projects, too many direct reports. And there's I know that there's a lot of data out there about what's the most efficient team size. For me, if you're like in the 5 to 8 employees, like that is the best for senior, I'd say like project manager type functions, engineers, PMs, analysts on that side of that. Obviously, if you've got, line workers, there's a bunch of different caveats to that of other types. But,
direct, indirect.
Right. If for direct reports, the data shows that 5 to 8 is the magic number, where that's where you have the best chance. I know all of my people. We have a relationship where we've got strong feedback. They know that there's time in my schedule. They can come and talk to me. I can go and follow up with them on all those kinds of things. More than that, like I've managed, like the largest team that I managed was about 40 people, direct of the 40 people. And I went and structured it and I got it back down to like 12 to 14. It grew again as other teams moved in, but it was overwhelming of the number of requests coming in. That's all I did was deal with the one-on-one. So I realized that not having that structure, that was burdening the team. It was keeping me from being able to help people that came with valid reasons to come to me. And so that's an example of, looking at and saying, hey, we've now peaked on what we can do with this, and we need to look at moving it to the next level. And this was promoting some people up as team leads, structuring in a way and moving things around.
Yeah, I think often, a lot of times it's also kind of one of those things where you don't even realize that, you've got all this extra bureaucracy or extra red tape or extra things going on until you start getting into it. And a lot of this is where, especially doing consulting, we'll get into things. I'm like, oh yeah, we're totally into it and everything's fine. And then you get involved. And as soon as you start, well, okay, so it's like this. We have this process and this person has to do this and this person has to do this. And then everybody's going to sit around and wait. And you don't realize how much is there until you actually start living within that culture sometimes. And I think, from a real world perspective, this happens to us a lot. And I can tell the places that we work with that have kind of efficiency management and optimized everything versus the places that haven't, because we get in and it's as simple as something like requesting permissions or requesting to replace a device or things like that. You get into one organization and you're going to have to chase down people forever trying to figure out who's the right person to talk to get something done, as opposed to another organization that I can simply go to this link, fill out a form, and somebody will come to me and make sure it happens, right? You can see the difference in that. So I look at some of these real world scenarios where bureaucracy slows you down, and oftentimes, it's very, very visible.
Yeah, and it can be really demotivating for employees as well. I mean, I've certainly had that where I was in roles where we were not allowed. This is like my junior PM days. We were not allowed to go and show any initiative, go and help in other areas. And so like constantly felt like going to my manager and we're like, okay, this is done. What next? Could you not give me a couple different things that I could work on and in parallel, or be ready, lower priority things, other initiatives that are more internal versus customer based, so that when I'm waiting on a response for that next step with that project, I've got something else to go and do. For me, I mean, the worst thing is, and with my personality and my defects, it's not having enough to do is the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, you like to stay busy and like to have something to focus on. I'm kind of the same way. Like, I'd rather be
full inbox.
Yeah, I'd rather be delivering and doing something than sitting around and waiting. In fact, I did a contracting gig a long time ago at a place that shall not be named, and I got in there, and the bureaucracy was so bad that I was really kind of doing this one little niche thing. And I thought I was coming in for, a certain amount of time to do a specific thing. And I kind of was. But then once I got in there, I realized that it only took like this much of my time. So I'm like, oh, well, how else can I help? They're like, no, we don't want you to help anything. We want you to only do this thing. And I said, so I want to make it really clear. Like, I'm legit getting paid to sit here and do like an hour's worth of work because I'm not allowed to do anything else for the rest of this time. And they're like, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what we're asking.
I've had that exact same thing. I'm telling you, I hated it. I made excellent money. In fact, I did the same thing. I was a contractor in that role. And I got to the end of that. It was a year contract and they wanted me to extend or to become permanent. And I declined. I said, I can't do this. I cannot do this. And they had the time, they had a no work from home policy. I'm like, this is too much time doing nothing. I cannot do this job. And so I was happy to the end. They wanted to extend. They said, could we do a 3-month extension? I did 2 weeks extension.
So so what not to do? Pigeonhole your employees to a point that they are unsuccessful and demotivated.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of those things, when you have that kind of, redundant workflows or all the bureaucratic layers, some people will operate within that, but I'm telling you, the people that you want to stick around won't do that for long. They will fill their time in other ways. They want their mind expanded. They want to be learning and growing and doing hard things. And so they're execution based and they're value driven, and they want those kinds of tasks and assignments.
Well, it also, it really, I hate to say, it makes people dumber, right? It keeps people from really thinking. It keeps them from, making good improvements, like you said, creatively. And so at the end of the day, like, what ends up happening is they're really just kind of wasting their time by being there, because it's not really bettering the business. It's not bettering the group. It's not bettering them. And they end up, kind of becoming a shell of who they are. And so, I mean, if you think of it from a personal and a culture perspective, too much bureaucracy not only hinders the project and hinders things happening at a process level, but it has devastating effects on individuals. They're like way more likely for burnout. They're way more likely to have, stress disorders and things like that. And so as much as you think that it may be helping your process, just understand that, there's lots and lots of proven stuff out there about too much bureaucracy really having impacts on people.
Yeah. And something that was, good governance in the beginning But if it's not constantly, looking inward, if you don't have part of the process reviewing, does this still make sense? Like I would, when I started building project management organizations, and I had, go and as a consultant and work with and advise companies that were project based, and I had this structure. And this gets back to what you always say, I always say, is like about methodology. Have a methodology, but whatever it is, we don't care what it is. But I would always tell like my PMs that I would send to PMI for their certification, for the project management professional PMP certification, is I'd say, do not come back and try to apply everything that you've learned. Use what makes sense, constantly adjust. So as a consultant, I would go in around the PMO structure. We'd try things. And after a while, we'd adjust. We'd be like, this is not really picking up people. We do things a little differently here. It's not being used. Fine. Jettison that. Do what makes sense there. Take what's good, expand on that, leave the rest. Some level of governance is necessary. So just to make sure that we have proof, data points of projects are starting, being done, completed, success, not success, whatever it is, we've learned from it. Let's go and do more. But they need to be more flexible. So that's why we use the word agile with a small a. And that idea of, I like this, of the MVB instead of MVP. Instead of the minimally viable product, you've got minimally viable bureaucracy. What's the least amount of bureaucracy that we need to have in place?
Yeah, I just think a lot about, when people start to do things and people are really excited, a lot of times, when you're doing something that's being successful, but if you, like you said, if you leave it too long, is it still providing value? And what's really funny to me is that at the end of the day, the stuff that gets dropped is the maintenance and the review and the postmortems and the retrospectives. And that's kind of ironic because that's the part that really needs to stick around and continue to happen. And I feel like oftentimes people are like, oh, I'm being efficient, so I'm removing the postmortem. And it's like, that's actually not helping you. What it's doing is, keeping you kind of stuck in the bureaucracy instead of helping you to get out. You're like removing your little light at the end of the tunnel and you're keeping yourself stuck in it.
We saw like the waves, like 10 years ago, the waves of layoffs of testing QA people. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, well, we're now doing like the dual engineer model and all this other methodology. And so it's like, oh, so you're not building the bugs into your code. You're just, withholding the bad code and just doing good code now, because it's like, no, you still need to have testing. Like, I think that bit a lot of people that went and did that. No, but I think I really like the idea though of, empowering everyone to have some ability to go in and to identify, again, back to that autonomy thing, identify too much structure, too many rules, too many policies over here. It's really inefficient. We're going to make a change, share that out there, or at least to have feedback. So as a team, as an organization, we could talk about those things, reward people for that. They're going to, identify that. But when people become more outcome focused, mm-hmm. and they say, well, this 20-step process, I can get to it in 12 steps. Why am I doing the other 8? Okay, 2 of those are because we have to for auditing, legal reasons, but the rest of them, just inefficiencies. Why are we not changing this?
Yeah, and I think you said it, you hit it right there. It's not about removing governance. It's not about removing some levels of bureaucracy. It is identifying and optimizing them so that the rigor you do have serves a purpose.
Right. A purpose. Just think of Steve Martin, the jerk. I have a purpose.
I think what's real. I was sitting here laughing because I think the movie Idiocracy, the scene that always gets me is with the little floor cleaner, and it's like, your floor is now clean. Your floor is now clean. It's literally like cleaning one little spot. Right. This is an example of where somebody automated a process. They set it down, they let it go, and it forgot about it for who knows how long, to a point that now it's still serving its purpose, but it's not accomplishing its goal.
Well, that's the whole. I was thinking of that movie as well earlier in this discussion, because somebody who was thinking too hard about it's like the people that complain that watching Star Wars or Star Trek is how come they're not floating around and they're flying through space and there's no gravity and stuff around there. It's like you're thinking too hard. It's just a movie, dude. Like Idiocracy is the kind of same way. It's like, but if you think about it, how can you get a couple hundred years in when everybody getting stupider? Is because everything was so automated, the bureaucracy was there and they just never changed it. And then when it didn't get changed, garbage piled up and people got stupider.
That's exactly it.
That'll happen in your organization. Garbage will start piling up. People will get dumber.
It's definitely, proven.
Science. It's on TV. It's been in the movies, folks. It's old. It's data-based. It's truth.
What not to do. Don't ever rethink things. Just let people
truth.
drive right off the edge of the road.
I just like watering the plants with sports drinks. If you've not seen the movie Idiocracy, I think it's kind of like one of those important American films, like the movie Spaceballs. It's also like, needs to be seen.
I think Idiocracy is like our mascot movie for Project Failure Files. Is everything what not to do.
That's right. We'll just replay that movie. So yeah. But so thinking about some practical steps, what are some a practical approach to streamlining bureaucratic processes? And the first one comes from, like, again, being open, having conversations about, so you're constantly reassessing the value of every process.
Yeah. I think every single time anybody does anything, they should always have the opportunity to say, this doesn't make sense anymore, or we should be allowed to change. And that doesn't mean it will change. It doesn't mean it should change, but there should be an opportunity to review it.
Yeah. I think it's just a healthy process. I used to ask this in governance bodies, is like, is it making sense? Are we having bottlenecks here? At what stage? What can we do to reduce that bottleneck? Sometimes there's nothing that you could do. It is because of the way that it is, but you're aware of that and you're asking questions. And if something changes, you ask that question again. But the next part of that is that actually showing, hey, we've eliminated these redundant steps. Make that part of that change management culture where you're calling it out and saying, hey, this was a great suggestion by such and such. We've done this. We're reducing this. And so we're speeding up this process because of it. Here's the efficiency. Here's the data. Here's the result out of that.
Yeah, well, and sometimes it's eliminating it and sometimes it's automating it.
Right.
So sometimes the step doesn't need to exist. Sometimes the step is manual, but it's something that maybe a human doesn't need to do, or maybe it's something in some way that you can just bring together in some lens, laser focus kind of way where you can take it off of everybody's plate and automate that in a way that makes sense. And you just kind of got to figure out what that means for each process.
Yeah, I love cultures that talk about this, where teams, where leaders, where managers, they prioritize efficiency over that procedural complexity. They're constantly looking at that. Again, they could have reward systems that are in there. And one way to do that is very simple, is around having a feedback loop, a form, part of the mechanics of your team meetings that you are regularly soliciting feedback to say, like, again, where are these things happening? Make it part of the conversation, make it part of the culture. And the more that you do that, and people will be like, oh, everything's great and running well. It's like, eventually it'll start to click because it gets ingrained, and people will start thinking about that when they run into those inefficiencies, and be like, why are we doing it this way? Why are we not doing it this way? We could bypass all this nonsense. And then they'll introduce it.
We were just chatting about this the other day, actually, within our own company. We were talking about, the idea that I'm always pushing people, like, what are your risks? What are your concerns? What are the things that are in your way? What are your roadblocks? And I was just thinking the other day, I was like, how can I incentivize people to really identify those risks and bring them up? Because even in a small company, we have challenges. And the more that people can be like, hey, this is something we need to fix, the more we can get better and change as we grow.
Yep. And when you've got that more data coming in, it means that you can make decisions as a leader, as a manager. If people are self-reporting on this, if they're identifying this, if you're automating, getting more data around these things, you're going to be able to make faster decisions. You're going to be able to execute. You're going to get more employee engagement. Your stakeholder conversations, the value of those discussions and what you're sharing will increase. I love that when people feel empowered to go and make things better, a funny thing happens. Things get better.
Now, I don't know, Christian. You're talking about all this stuff, and there's probably people out there like, you're taking away my cake job where I don't have to do anything. And there are a few people that are like that out there. But truthfully, I agree with you. I think that most people would rather be part of the process and go to work and really enjoy it and do things that they see as providing value than to just show up and be trapped in a bureaucratic blanket of 1 hour a day of work.
Yeah. Well, I think as a kind of the conclusion here, like bureaucracy, it should, as you said, serve a purpose. It's not there because we need to have something there to fill space. We need to constantly look at our process. We need to look at, what is the motivation of the people that's affecting the culture? Is it stifling innovation because people feel like there's just too many, layers to this, too many barriers for us to go in and do this. And sometimes it's because you discover like the cool innovation and you find out, well, what was your process for that? Well, they kind of went around all of that structure, that process. Then you have to be worried about other security issues of, you mean you put some of our IP out on a third-party cloud environment that wasn't approved so you could go and, like, it's wonderful you came up with this idea, but you have to be worried about that. Where's our IP? What are people doing? And so really kind of the call to action is to, I would say, encourage people, especially your project managers and leaders and your stakeholders, regularly assess, discuss, how can we refine our existing processes? What can we do away with? What is not adding value? And just make that part of your conversation. It just made me think of, just popped in. My wife used to be a real fan of this woman called the Fly Lady, which I think goes back to like the 70s. And it was, it was a way for like around your home, I think primarily to keep things organized. And my wife, who's very process driven, had what she called, it was referred as the control binder. I mean, this is excessive. I'm not saying go do this, but just as an example, had this control binder. And so part of it was that she was feeling stay-at-home mom for many years, overwhelmed by, all the things that the kids were involved in. And she grew up where they were like, her and her siblings were always in dance classes and gymnastics and sports and all this thing going on. So that was like, she just felt like that's what I need to go and do. So she was creating all this chaos and doing these things. So she created this control binder that literally went through for the 7 days of the week. And each one of them had a focus, had a purpose of the day. She didn't have to worry about doing everything all at once and all of the things. Every day had a different focus. And so she knew, hey, I accomplished this. I've showed progress. Everything will get done over the course of the week rather than being anxious about everything. But that idea of having that structure to go through and say, here's how we're doing it, outline it, model it out. This is the way that we're doing things. And then take a structured, intentional approach to going and fixing those things. Measure it. Is it improving? Is this getting better? So it's like a control binder approach to then going up and clean those things up. And what you'll see is by taking that organized approach and not trying to, as we've talked about in other episodes, biting off more than you can chew, trying to do too much too quickly, that orderly approach, you're going to get through much more than you would taking a chaotic, trying to do everything at once approach.
Well, and also skipping important steps for just to skip steps also causes just as many problems in that scenario, because maybe you're not going to get things done and it's going to be a long time before you get back to it. So there's always a great balance between governance and doing the things that you need to do and bureaucracy and too much too many things that you probably don't need to do, and finding a healthy balance so that you're doing something that has a purpose, but you're also accomplishing the goal that you're setting for yourself.
Yeah. You want to stay agile. You want to give people control over what they do. But you need to, this is another great example of, you need to work out loud. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're experiencing, and share.
Absolutely. That's culture. It all comes back to culture.
It always does. Well, I think that's it for this week's episode. Of course, be sure to follow us out there. If you're not already following us out on the socials, you can find everywhere. I think Sharon, just about everywhere you've got the E. So Sharon E. Weaver, just to clarify.
It's a differentiator.
Yes, it's
unique.
Embrace that. Of course, you can find all of the past episodes on YouTube under Buckley Planet. If you come across Sharon's profile, of course, she's got a playlist for all of these as well. Please, if you're new to the show, go check those out. And then finally, sign up for the projectfailurefiles.com, our newsletter, brand new. So just coming up. But what we're doing is we're making sure that you know what's the summary of last week's episode, what topics coming up next week. So we'll be pushing these things out. And other than that, we will be back next Monday, same time, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. And for every Monday into the near future, that I think we're contractually obligated to be here forever.
It's just what I've got on my Mondays for the rest of my life. Like that's just
right.
Gonna be my Monday joy.
So thank you. If you have a topic we've not yet covered, let us know as well in that feedback. So there's a feedback form as part of the sign up for the newsletter. But anyway, Sharon, hey, have a great day.
Yeah. Have a great time. See you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.